afternoon, everyone. We're so proud to be here to talk about the recently passed Police Accountability Bill and watch the governor sign it into law. In our country and in our beautiful state of Connecticut, we so value our men and women in blue, and we're so grateful for the work that they do every day to protect us and our families. We know that the vast majority of our police officers put the needs of their communities first. Our men and women in law enforcement are selfless, they're caring, they're compassionate, and they're proud of the badge that they wear. This legislation is not an anti-police measure. Rather, it's a bill about holding those who don't follow the law accountable. This legislation will help protect our law enforcement officers by implementing a number of important reforms, including improving minority police recruiting. And this will protect our communities because we will have more police officers that look like the communities that they are sworn to protect. It will also include implicit bias training for all police officers, and it will improve screening for mental health. This legislation will also help us rebuild trust in our communities, between community members and our law enforcement, by increasing transparency and accountability, and by requiring very simple but powerful things, like requiring police officers to prominently display their badge and their name tag. It will also expand the use of body and dashboard cameras. This legislation moves us in a better direction toward fairness and equality for everyone. And this legislation couldn't have been passed without the hard work of some very important people. And so we appreciate the advocacy and hard work of Senator Gary Winfield, who joins us today, as also State Representative Steve Staffstrom, our Judiciary Committee co-chairs, and State Representatives Brandon McGee, Representatives Jerry Reyes, Representative Robin Porter, Tony Walker, Anthony Nolan, Chris Rosario, Senator Doug McCrory, and so many others who have made their voices heard and who took the time to have honest conversations with each of us and fought to unite us all as we create meaningful change and transparency. And I'm so proud to have with us today Senator Gary Winfield, without whose advocacy, persistence, and perseverance we couldn't have seen this legislation get passed. Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you, Governor. So we're here today, and from my perspective, the Lieutenant Governor framed this well. I just want to say one other thing about how we get here today, because I think it's important. In the streets of Connecticut, we saw a lot of people, thousands of people, go into our streets for weeks and suggest to us that we needed to do something about the system that is in place. And the government here responded. And I think that's an important part of the discussion that sometimes gets lost, talking about the advocacy of myself and others. And I want to thank the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus for its efforts to move a bill forward, and particularly Anthony Nolan, who put a lot on the line for doing this bill, and Rep. Robin Porter. I think the two of them form the heart of what we did. Again, I think the bill is really important. I think there's some particularly important parts of the bill, including the Inspector General, the use of force part of the bill, and the most controversial part of the bill. And I think when you, and all of the bill is important, but I think when you put those parts together, it offers the public that may see law enforcement in a way that's a little different than some of us see, something that they can believe in. So thank you again for having us here today, and I appreciate being able to say a couple of words.
Thank you, Senator. We're also very proud to have the person who led the debate in the House of Representatives, State Representative Steve Staffstrom. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thanks so much for allowing us this opportunity to discuss this very important bill, and to thank so many people who were instrumental in bringing this about. As Senator Winfield said, Connecticut has heard the cry for change. and the need to move our state in a new direction when it comes to policing, particularly in minority communities like my home city of Bridgeport. I'm proud of the work that the Judiciary Committee has done over the last several weeks, obviously with my co-chair and longtime advocate, Senator Winfield, as well as our ranking members, the lead Republicans on the committee, who spent hours and hours with us vetting proposals from our various caucuses, from interest groups, from stakeholders, to put together this very robust bill. I also would be remiss without thanking the governor and his staff, who obviously were along with us every step of the way here, providing their insight, their suggestions, as well as we crafted this legislation. I want to emphasize, this is not a bill that was done in haste or unnecessarily rushed. In fact, this was a bill that was done purposely to respond to this call for change and the need for quick change. I'm proud of the work we've done vetting it. I'm thankful for all of those who reached out via email or to their legislators or attended the public hearing on this bill to make their voice heard. Certainly, there's no question that change is hard, especially when that change calls for giving up a degree of control in favor of more civilian oversight and accountability. But I firmly believe that change will take us to a better place in this state. We stand firmly with those departments and officers who are willing to work with us as we move to implement the important changes in this bill and help us improve policing and community relations across our state. Now more than ever, we all need to be working together to understand and implement the nuances of this bill. So thank you very much, Governor, and look forward to you signing the bill, and obviously thanks to my colleagues who are joining us as well here today.
We are very proud to have our municipal partners with us as well, and we're honored to have Mayor Neil O'Leary, who comes with a special perspective because before he was the chief elected official for the city of Waterbury, he led the city of Waterbury's police force. Mayor, thank you so much for joining us. Would you say a few words, please?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to join you all here today for this bill signing. When I reflect on the senseless killings of George Floyd and other victims at the hands of the police, I continue to be deeply saddened and very disturbed. But out of these tragedies has arisen an opportunity for all of us to look at ourselves in the mirror and reflect on the role that each of us has to play in ensuring that all of our residents feel safe and protected. I commend Governor Lamont and the legislature, particularly the Judiciary Committee, for working collaboratively to enact what I believe are measures that will be successful in creating a safer Connecticut for both our residents and our police officers. I think it's important to take a moment to reiterate my belief that the overwhelming majority of police officers take pride in their role as protectors and relationship builders in their respective communities. Every day, the men and women who have made the choice to serve as police officers wake up, say goodbye to their families, and go to work with the understanding that should danger present itself, it is their job to protect and serve. It is also important to remember that the role of police officers in our community goes far beyond the duties associated with their job as emergency responders. As a former police officer and current mayor, I believe it is incumbent upon all of us to continue to do all we can to work together, to build bridges and take action to make our communities safer. This new law will enable good police to do their jobs and protect them from rogue officers whose actions have eroded the public trust. Governor Lamont, thank you again for your leadership. I look forward to continuing to work with you to make Connecticut a more equitable, compassionate, and safer home for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and we are very pleased to have joining us as well State Representative Brandon McGee, who leads the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. Rep. McGee, please share a few thoughts.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Bysowitz. There are so many people who worked for days, weeks, and in some cases, decades on the kinds of policies that we're about to see enacted today through House Bill 6004. To Gary, Senator Winfield, you have spent the better part of your life advocating for many of these measures, and my heart goes out to you. Thank you to Steve Staffstrom as well for your tireless work in the recent weeks, and to Matt and Joe for your leadership. That's Matt Ritter and Joe Arosimowicz for your leadership in helping to turn the calls of demonstrators into state laws. As chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the entire Black and Puerto Rican caucus, especially my vice chairman, Representative Geraldo Reyes Jr. Thank you for pouring your hearts out in the recent session days. Far too often, people of color are asked to educate those unaware of injustice and re-traumatize themselves throughout that process. But your stories and lived experiences shook this building, that's the state capitol, to its core. And we would not be here today without your passion. Governor Ned Lamont, my friend, thank you for recognizing the importance of standing up in the face of violence and systemic racism. It has been an emotional 8 days, and your leadership has been crucial. While the protests that began in early June were a response to a murder in Minneapolis, it's no secret to many of us that for far too often or far too long, Connecticut law has enabled the violence of rogue officers. The provisions, however, in this bill are not meant to hinder or punish good cops. It's to provide the people with a voice in a system that for decades went unaccountable and unchecked power. The reforms we see here are a part of a process to provide our people, the people here in the state of Connecticut, with a say. Today, we take a massive step toward policing Connecticut, or rather policing in Connecticut, excuse me, and I am humbled to be part of this amazing day. So again, thank you, Governor Lamont, Gary, Steve, and Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Representative McGee. And now we'd like to introduce State Representative Anthony Nolan, who also has a very unique perspective because he is part of our lawmaking family, but he is also a police officer in the city of New London. So Representative Nolan, thank you so much for all of your great work and for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for including me in this sitting here. And first, I want to thank God for being able to be a part of this historic moment. We have been fighting for quite some time trying to put together this bill with our leaders, Gary Winfield and Steve Staffstrom, with Robin Porter and Representative McKee. It is a emotional roller coaster that we went through with the many changes and many disagreements. And sometimes, you know, we were upset with one another, but we fought through it to try and get to where we're going to be as soon as the governor signed this bill. I want to thank the governor and the lieutenant governor and the mayor for being here also for this important time. But our communities, as I said earlier this week, had an uprising. And that uprising told us that they were fed up with all the things that they were seeing on TV in other parts of the country, in Connecticut, in different parts of Connecticut, in regards to how police were treating people. And we all know that we have great police officers throughout our communities. But there are those that are not as great. That are the reason for what we have presented to try and be a lifesaver. And when I say a lifesaver, I am really talking about saving lives in regards to accountability. And this is a bill that I believe will help change the view of our community members, will help give them trust, will give more experience in things to our police officers with the needed training, mental health, body cameras, etc., to try and make our communities better. So I'm glad to be here. Glad to see the governor agreeing to put this bill forward and make our community better. And I just want to thank all the people that were when this historic moment happened, and thank them. And let's get back to work to things that are next. Thank you.
Representative Nolan, thank you so much. Ever since the killing of George Floyd occurred, we had people all across Connecticut, in our biggest cities, but in our suburban communities, in small towns, who came forward in huge numbers. And they came forward and they made their voices heard. And the governor and I attended some of these protests and vigils that were peaceful, but people demonstrated their fervor and their desire for significant change. And so that change couldn't have occurred without our legislators, and it couldn't have occurred without the leadership of our governor. So I'm so proud to introduce my partner, Governor Ned Lamont.
Well, thank you, Susan. First of all, Brandon, you mentioned the tireless efforts of Gary and Steve, and as I heard you at 3 o'clock in the morning, your respective days, back and forth, talk about tireless efforts. You know, I salute the energy and passion and smarts and grit you did. I love the way you started with a big table, and I thought that was really important. And I want to thank Rep. Rabimbus as well, and Senator Kissel, who were at that table on behalf of the Republican leadership. We also had members of the police force there. My great friend Neil O'Leary was there, and Neil is a former police chief, and now Mayor Waterbury came in, and he came in with some critiques as well about how to make this bill better. But I think at the end of the day, we all understand how important it was and what a big step this is. And I just want to say, first of all, to the police, the municipal police, the state police. I spent a lot of time with the state police. You know, you're my heroes. I saw after that George Floyd murder, I looked around the country. I saw arrests and see what's going on in Portland, and vandalism and looting, and that didn't happen in Connecticut. That didn't happen because the protesters were there representing the very best in our values, and the police were there with respect. And that's what makes for a great police force and community policing, and often they were there taking a knee or walking arm in arm, and I think we led by example as a state. For that, I am eternally grateful. We want to lead by example as well in terms of what we can learn and go forward, and we always have room for improvement in order to form a more perfect union. And that's what this bill is all about. It's not a knock on anybody. As Anthony said, we have a lot of great police, but we can do better. And every day, we as political folks, police, we have to continue to earn the respect of our community. That's what makes a community policing so powerful, and that's what this bill does. With the Inspector General, with the transparency, with the community policing, with the mental health and the checks and the training, it's going to make a great force even better, and I hope it serves as an example for those around the country. I'm proud of Connecticut today, and Gary and Steve, I'm ready to sign this bill. And Robin. Yeah, that was really good.
So Gary,
I do want to say.
you,
You can sign the bond copies too, sir.
yeah, let's do those, and then we'll give one to,
Steve, I did that for you.
okay, whoops.
And Gary, I did that for you. With just a personal note in there,
Okay,
because it was so deserved.
good.
And I don't know if you guys can stick around, but there might be just a few questions. Is that right, Max?
Yeah, so let's go back and then,
We will now take questions from the press in attendance. We'll start with News 12 Connecticut.
Hi, this message or this question is more for the lawmakers, but anyone can jump in. Representative Nolan mentioned, it's time to get to work on what's next, and this bill does lay out some things that you want to look at moving forward. Can all of you sort of talk about what you'd like to see in the next piece of legislation? I mean, maybe like traffic stop work or social workers, that sort of thing.
I believe that a lot of that work is going to come out of the work that we've sent to the task force to look at, including around the most controversial part of the bill, which was the immunity portion. But I think the task force itself has a lot of work that we've asked them to do. One of the very important things that doesn't often get talked about in this conversation is the issue of how police interact with those in our communities who have mental health issues. I think there's going to be a lot of focus there as well as many other areas. So I would say that much of the work is going to come out of that. And I'm sure as anything else in this building, there are plenty of people who have plenty of things they would like to have seen. So we'll have a very robust conversation going forward.
I think I would also add, too, I think what comes next out of this is as we continue to discuss racial equity and a fair and transparent justice system, this is not just about policing, but it's also on the back end of the justice system, too, in terms of our court system. I know certainly the governor had introduced legislation last year to erase criminal records, and certainly the Judiciary Committee was looking at that issue as well. We need to continue to look at that issue. One of the things in this bill that has not gotten a lot of talk about is prosecutors doing an initial screening of cases before they actually get into the court system and get put on a docket, and whether there are low-level offenses that really should be screened out before someone has to make that initial court appearance. I think certainly the work of the Judiciary Committee will continue on the broader justice system conversation as well.
And how would the social workers aspect work? I mean, you hear a lot of criticism that and posts on social media, that we're just going to send a social worker out to a violent situation. I mean, what would you tell people about how that could work well?
Yeah, I don't think we're looking as the social worker to be the first one to respond to a dangerous situation, but we've seen instances around the country and here in Connecticut, police forces that are using social workers in conjunction with their police force and having great results. Actually, Mayor O'Leary might want to jump in on this because I think Waterbury is actually one of the communities that is doing this in an exemplary way.
Thank you, Steve. You're right. Waterbury has engaged behavioral health clinicians for the past 10 years. They work full-time for us. They assist the police when we get a behavioral health related call. They de-escalate. They're trained to do so. Suicidal parties, people who have long history of mental illness. These individuals respond with the police. They more often than not, they know the individuals who they're responding to, and they have a rapport with those people, and it's amazing how their interaction de-escalates the situation, and we can get them the help that they need. As I said, we've been doing this now for over 10 years, and we've had great success in this area.
And Governor, just very quickly, an off-topic question. Right now, there are a lot of protesters over at Eversource headquarters. You just put out a statement a short time ago, thanking Pura for temporarily suspending the fee increases. Can you sort of talk about why you're backing that decision and what you hope comes out of it?
Yeah, Pure is the regulatory body that takes a good hard look at rate requests and rate increase requests from all of our utilities, in this case including Eversource. As you know, there was a 4% increase request. Some of that's related to federal government priorities and other things. But it was just worth taking a pause. Look, let's face it, the people of Connecticut, the people of this country have gotten slammed by a COVID economy over the last 4 months. The last thing they wanted to see was a big new electric bill coming in with sometimes a 50% increase on there. We're doing everything we can to make sure you have confidence that if there is an increase, why there's an increase, make sure there's no excess increase. And just as importantly, we're going to do everything we can to double down in terms of energy efficiency to make sure it makes it less expensive for you to cool your home in the summer and heat your home in the winter.
The Connecticut Mirror.
Good afternoon. Governor, Paul Mounds, who I thought I saw on the call here, and your chief legal counsel and policy director met with 4 police unions yesterday. Can you tell us what you think you and your administration learned from that meeting about what steps need to happen next?
Well, I'll start, but then I think Paul is on, and maybe he was at the meeting. But look, it's important to continue to build bridges. There's a lot of misinformation about this bill and virtually everything that happens in the state. So Paul went and sat down with the leaders of the police unions and some of the different municipalities, explained in some detail what Gary and Steve and the team were voting on and put together in this bill to show confidence and to build confidence for the police to know that we got their back.
Yeah, thanks, Governor. Just to echo what the governor stated, first and foremost, I went there and also told them the governor was signing the bill tomorrow, which is today. And of course, I was joined by our chief legal counsel, Bob Clark, and our policy director, Johnny Dock, to talk about various elements of the bills. I think one of the first and foremost things we wanted to get across is let's talk about the actual bill itself. Let's not talk about the emotion of the bill. I think that's one of the things that you heard directed today. I think the other part is, this is to echo on what Senator Winfield said on the floor of the House, as well as Representative Stafford. Senator Winfield said on the floor of the Senate, and Representative Stafford said on the floor of the House, is there's going to be continuous conversations as it deals with the bill, particularly on the implementation. And so for that, you have to talk to those in which the bill is going to affect directly. This is an administration from the beginning that is an open door policy, and that was shown yesterday. We had a very cordial conversation with all the various members of the unions held at the Connecticut State Police Union Hall, and we look forward to talk to other elements and other entities, particularly about the bill, and as we go forward not only into the fall, but also to the next legislative session in January.
Hearst, Connecticut Media. The Hartford Courant.
Thanks, Max. Governor, also off topic, on the Dr. Zeke Emanuel yesterday had some very serious concerns about high school sports and going forward in the fall, and the CIAC came out with its plan today. Do you believe high school sports can be played safely in Connecticut starting in September? And what changes would you recommend regarding delaying the season or not?
Yeah, Zeke Emanuel did suggest that hard contact sports like football maybe are risky in terms of transmission. He also pointed to the flare-ups and some of the parties going on around the state, thought that maybe football may be one more way that could be transmitted. So I hope that message went back to the football league, went back to the sports leagues, so as they try and find a way to get us back into sports safely, they take that to heart. Look, we've had summer sports going on for the last month or two right now, mainly sports where it's easier to social distance. We're going to try and get this right.
Also, you just mentioned a second ago the flare-ups. Some of these parties in Greenwich, I guess, have gotten kind of large, and some other parties Tell us again what message needs to be given to both the teenagers and the parents. We're basically 4.5 months into this pandemic, maybe more depending on your time frame. You would assume people would know what the situation is, but what is your message to the young people particularly, as well as their parents?
I know you think you're invincible. I know you don't think this virus can touch you. And I know you've been pent up for an awful long time and you're ready to let it rip. And it's the most dangerous thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for your family and your greater community. And I tell the parents, take a little responsibility here. Nothing is more important over the course of the next couple of months is to make sure we maintain our discipline going forward. And as I said yesterday, I think it was, other parents are reminding these parents how serious this is. Neil, is there anything you'd like to add? I don't know if Waterbury's had any similar incidents.
Thank you, Governor. We are following your lead, quite frankly, and reiterating to all of our people how important it is. I know it's 4.5 months into it, and everyone feels like because our infection rates are so low in the state of Connecticut, obviously amongst the best in the country, and our hospitalizations, everyone feels as though we can take the foot off the gas. That's a huge mistake. We've got to continue to restrain ourselves and discipline ourselves with social distancing. You're right about the sports. We've had success with summer sports programs, but only because people are wearing masks and practicing social distancing. Thank you.
Governor, I'll just add one other element. I think one of the most important things is where those parties are being held. We need the individuals who are participating in those, as well as the parents, to be forthcoming with information to our local health directors and to the Department of Public Health so we can appropriately contact trace from these various events. And so I think that's another thing that the governor and his administration want to get across. As the governor stated, it's important that we take self-accountability, but when these events do occur, please be forthcoming with information so we can be able to make sure that the general population of our state remains safe.
Thank you.
I believe there is a follow-up from the Connecticut Mirror. Paz, go ahead.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I didn't realize you're calling me back, but I just wanted one follow-up. Is there anything, I asked about the next step, was there anything concrete that came out of the meeting as far as something you've already identified requires, attention at this point, or is it too early for that?
I'll take this one, Governor. I would say that the most concrete was that we're going to continue having conversations and working with the legislature, the two chairs, and the leaders of the legislature of continual conversations. I would say that there are elements that were brought forward by particular members of the police union that they wanted to bring to our attention. And that was one of the major elements that we wanted to get across from the meeting was what are the particular issues of concern from an implementation standpoint. But what we're going to be doing is working with the legislature in coordination for any future modifications or adjustments that may be needed.
And real quick, Mayor O'Leary, how about from the municipal point of view, is there anything you have on a wish list for changes?
Well, for sure, we want to have a seat at the table and continue to express local law enforcement issues on the municipal side, of course, and have that voice be heard. And, obviously, we've all had a lot of conversation and a lot of education and qualified immunity related issues. And we want to make sure that, our officers feel that we've got their back. And at the same time, we also want to send a message that, this reform is a great bill in so many ways. And it's going to give the law enforcement management, particularly, the tools to make sure that police accountability is first and foremost. And I believe that we can, and we have great working relationships, and we can work together to get through these issues so that everyone will feel that the bill is doing exactly what it was intended to do.
Thank you, and thank you, Max.
The Associated Press.
Thank you. This is Sue Haig. I apologize. I got on late, so I apologize if you guys addressed this before. But I was curious, do you believe the warnings that this bill will discourage people from wanting to become police officers and will encourage people that are on the force to retire?
Anthony, do you want to start with that? Anthony, do you want to take that question about what impact this bill could have on folks thinking about retiring or joining the force? You're on mute.
Governor, if I may.
Go ahead, Neil. That'd be great.
I believe that there is still an enormous amount of misinformation out there in the law enforcement community and in the public in general about the contents of this bill. I think it's incumbent upon all of us, particularly Senator Winfield and Representative Stafstrom, to work with us to make sure, and I know that the police unions were in yesterday, and I'm grateful for that, because I think there is too much misinformation still floating around about what this bill does and doesn't do. For senior officers who are eligible to retire, this may, in fact, if they aren't well informed about actually what this bill really does, they may consider the retirement. We've heard that in our police department of over 300 members. But quite frankly, for the young individuals who are looking to become police officers, I believe once they understand and fully recognize what the intent of this bill is, I believe that it will not inhibit them from still wanting to be career law enforcement officers. But I will say this in general, Sue, we have seen over the last decade, the number of interested individuals in becoming police officers has been on the decline, and so we'll have to watch it very closely.
And so,
I'll agree with that. I think that I think it's not only because of this bill that there's a decline, or there is talk about a decline, but there was a decline before this bill. I've heard both sides of the story. I've heard people say, well, I'm going to leave now because I don't want to put my family in jeopardy. I've heard people say, well, this might be an opportunity to join the police force now, because now there's an accountability for what's going on. And I agree with the fact that there's a lot of miscommunication going on, and sometimes people just perceive it differently. So I do believe a lot of clarity has to be done or made to make it better. Example, just last night, Chief of Police for New London came in and gave the guys a better understanding in regards to immunity and how they don't have to worry about it, because they still have immunity with our indemnification. I forgot the word. They still have it with our city. So for them to be worried about not being covered under that, unless they do something egregious and wrong, I think it was a easier setting for them to understand.
And Sue, hey, it's Susan Beisowitz. I just wanted to add to your question that we are going to have a huge opportunity in the state of Connecticut, because over the next several years, 40% of our state troopers will be retiring. And so the governor and I, since we took office, have been working to, especially with the Council on Women and Girls, to make sure that women and people of color are recruited into our state police force, and we need to be doing that as well at the local level, and that's why this legislation is a really good push forward.
If I could.
Yes, please.
I think to the Lieutenant Governor's last point, I think if you're thinking about those populations and the type of profession they want to go into a profession that seems to respect them. They want to go into a profession itself is respected. And I think when you put in place, if we implement this correctly, I think when you put in place the provisions of this bill, you change the perception of those parts of our communities to what the profession itself is. And I think over the long run, the profession will benefit for that. And I think that's something that we haven't really been talking about, but I could imagine that if you're a young kid growing up right now in certain communities, you don't look at the police as a place where you want to be. But hopefully if we've done this right in the coming years, that might actually be a reality.
Okay, thank you all very much.
The Waterbury Republican American.
Hi, I guess this would be a question for the two chairmen, the governor, and of course Mayor O'Leary. On this qualified, it's not even qualified immunity, it's governmental immunity on the state level. How do you describe what this bill actually does? Because depending on who you're talking to, you hear a lot of different things. It really doesn't change anything. It makes it easier to get a case in front of a jury in state courts if you're able to get over the exception. The current law, unchanged by this bill, has an exception for wanton, malicious behavior. So, could you provide some context to what that change, this most controversial provision of the bill, means?
Well, I've described it this way. What the bill does is it provides a limited civil cause of action where an individual's civil rights have been violated by a police officer, and that officer did not have a good faith belief that they were acting within their legal authority when they violated somebody's constitutional rights. So it has to be both of those. It has to be a violation of somebody's constitutional rights, and the officer did not have a good faith belief that they were acting within their legal authority when they did that. When those two conditions are satisfied, someone would be able to bring a claim in Connecticut Superior Court. The officer would be entitled to an attorney, and which would be paid for by the town they're employed by, or the state police if they're or the state if they're a state trooper, and the state or the municipality would actually be on the hook for any judgment that's entered against that officer, unless the jury finds at the end of the day that that the officer violated somebody's constitutional rights maliciously, wantonly, or intentionally. And only in those limited instances would the individual officer be liable for damages. And that, frankly, is what is already, that second piece already is federal law. So it really is no change or no additional legal liability potential to the individual officer.
Want to add to that, Gary, at all? Or?
No, I think Steve covered it. I think the other part that we have kind of tried to talk to is the way that qualified immunity on the federal level is developed, and what has made it impossible, basically, to pierce qualified immunity, and that we're not looking to add that additional step where you would necessarily have to have the significantly similar case. And I think that's part of what people are missing here as well. But I think Steve laid it out perfectly.
We're going, the other way we've described it is we're kind of going back to the qualified immunity defense as it was originally envisioned back in the 1960s, as opposed to the overly restrictive balance that it has become through the 1980s, 90s, and into the present.
Mayor O'Leary, what about you?
I honestly, I wish I could have explained it as succinctly and eloquently as Representative Stastrom, Paul, and you know, and we all know that there is so much misinformation and misunderstandings about what this is all about. But I believe if everyone could have just listened to Steve Stastrom over the last several minutes, they'd have a much better idea of what this is all about. And so I'm grateful for that, because I'm going to use your words exactly, Steve, probably over the next several weeks to explain this to them in terms that are easily understood, as you just did. Thank you.
Do you believe that the changes made in any way increase the exposure to liability to cities and towns or individual police officers as a mayor or a former police chief?
I think that the concern of myself and CCM for sure is that there may be some misinterpretation across the board, and that this misinterpretation may result in some more civil litigation presented to the cities who cover the individual officers and their municipalities. But you know what? I'm not sure that that's actually going to happen. Quite frankly, in my own mind, but you know what? That's the great thing about this communication that we've developed here. We'll be able to monitor it closely and report back to each other. And by the way, if it encourages folks who feel that they have been mistreated by the police, and quite frankly, and it gives them an opportunity, they feel at least an opportunity to file a civil complaint, and by all means, they're certainly entitled to do so. On the police side, I think that the police will recognize that there's going to be a higher level of accountability brought upon them, at least closer eyes. And I think that and of course, with the body camera portion of this bill that no one's spoken about today, what I think is really important, I think all these things are going to weigh into police and how they do their job. And again, the majority of police officers, I think Anthony would admit, do their jobs great. They don't care if there's a body camera on them or not. And quite honestly, I think that this is all a good thing. I really do.
And maybe this is for the two chairmen. What exactly is a wanton, reckless, or malicious act? Can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, that is a well-developed body of federal case law that's out there, and we've basically borrowed that 50 years or so of jurisprudence. But basically, it would be something like leaving your knee on someone's neck for the better part of 9 minutes.
And the only thing I'll add to that is the reason for mirroring the language is precisely what many officers were concerned about. We didn't want this something that you just happen to be doing your duty and you trip over. We wanted it to have something to do with what the officer is intending to do. And so that's how that language becomes a part of the bill.
Okay, thank you very much.
Fox 61.
Hi, Governor. I have a question regarding COVID. Yesterday, you mentioned you were concerned about an uptick in COVID cases in Rhode Island. Are you considering adding the state to our travel advisory?
Yeah, it's not something I consider. It's based upon the metrics, and that says if you have a positivity rate above 10% or 10 per 100,000, I think it is, over 7 days, then you automatically go into the quarantine. And Rhode Island is not there yet, but we watch that closely. I will say we did about another 12,000 or so tests, and we had less than 1% or about 1% positivity yesterday. So our trends continue to be in a good direction.
CT News Junkie.
Thanks, Max. On the police accountability bill, I just want to know, the qualified immunity doesn't go into effect until July. Some of the other provisions don't go into effect until April. Is there a chance that the legislature is going to come back and think about some of this stuff and possibly make some revisions?
Christine, I think there's always the possibility we make revisions. Certainly, you said April, that's the use of force policy, and part of the reason for that date is our use of force policy in Connecticut kind of trends below kind of the national model or model penal code definition. This was actually something that was pointed out to us very acutely by the governor's staff, and so the Post Council has been working to update that and has a team of national experts looking at that issue kind of even before we started on this bill. We kind of know where we want to go in terms of the overall strategy and direction, but Post is going to report back to us on some of the details. And as they flush out what the training is going to look like on the new use of force policy, we may have to make a few tweaks to the language in order to match with that. But we're committed to working with leadership of the Post Council in order to make sure the training matches up with the statute.
I would say that I think that the committee has a long history of being committed to making sure that we get things correct. And I think that the way that you do that is by engaging in real conversation and seeing what comes out of those conversations. So there will be suggestions that probably will not jump the hurdle, if you will, but there'll probably be some suggestions that do. And I know my co-chair have always been committed to the history of the Judiciary Committee, which is to remain collaborative and in conversation. So we will see. And if you know anything about this legislature, we tend to take a look at a lot of what we've done and come up with solutions to make the process itself better.
The one thing I just want to make sure we mention,
police unions have reached out, and how many police unions have said, look, I'm willing to work with you on this?
I think that number has increased since the bill passed.
It's definitely increasing. We've had some good conversations, certainly over the last day or two. I know. I think certain police departments are starting to get it and understand the positives in this bill and the need for change. And I also want to point out, it's not like this is the first time. If we do end up making some modifications to this bill as we move forward, that's not uncommon, particularly for the Judiciary Committee. We have many of the most thorny issues that come through our committee, and we will refine or recraft a bill several years in a row in order to get it exactly right. We've done that time and time again.
Thank you.
News 8.
I think that's probably a wrap. Let me just say, we've got a fair number of elected folks here who played a role in making this happen, and especially to Steve and Gary. I mean, the thousands of hours you put in campaigning and knocking on doors and explaining your point of view is not all for election night where the balloons fall out of the ceiling. It's really about moments like this, where after the thousands of hours you put in fighting for this bill, listening to different points of view, crafting something that gets the majority and makes a difference for people across this state and hopefully across this country for generations to come. Thanks for what you did. Thank you. Take care, everybody.